Okay, number one, thank you so much for having me here. I'd like to thank Amy and Michael specifically, and Atlanta Celebrates Photography. Also, I need to give out a shout out to Julie, who's here from Girls High. Yes. Julie. Yes, so awesome. I don't even know what to do. I'm so excited about it. So thank you so much for having me. I am probably, well, no, I'm definitely going to totally rush through this lecture because who wants to talk about themselves on, and then I would like to ask questions. So sorry to just give a heads up with that, but who feels like it? I mean, hold on, talking about me. No, thank you. So I've been to Atlanta before, twice at least, maybe 3 times, which is odd to not know. But it's crazy, but I really like Atlanta. I'm very happy to be back. And so Atlanta, I stayed downtown, and this was reflected outside my hotel window in a puddle. And it has always been an important photograph to me. So despite the fact that I've only been here literally for a few days out of my entire life, this particular image has been one that's kind of held on. So thanks, Atlanta. So I'm going to talk a little bit about I-95. I worked on this project from 2000 to 2010, and I exhibited photographs underneath I-95 in South Philadelphia. It was 231 photographs, and the plan essentially stayed the same from start to finish. With the exception, I added an extra hour because I felt that 2 hours was not long enough to navigate the space under I-95. And here it is. So in 2000, I got a camera and I started to make photos. And previous to that, I hadn't been a photographer except in high school. And I decided that I wanted to work on this decade-long installation. And so I started it up. This is a map of how I-95 was structured. So it's as if you're looking down from the highway down on top of the pillars. And then I'm actually using this to actually examine something, and I'm very happy about it. So at the base of each pillar was a number that was chalked on the ground, and on every available side of each pillar was one photograph. When I started, they were all color copies, and then as I got more money and I was able to get more equipment, they became fancy inkjet prints that I laminated with an adhesive backing. And I worked on this project pretty much by myself. It was me and my wife. And as the project went on, more and more people came to help. I had roped my immediate family into it for their lifetime. And this was actually the last year in which a number of people came to help clean under the highway. For a very brief period, I had never got a permit or asked for permission to use the space, but I had somehow managed to trick the city into helping to clean for a period of time. And then, of course, Vince Fumo, oh no, indicted and in jail. And so, lost my hookup in South Philly. It's a real shame. So, each year, the show would start at 1 p.m., and in May, there's a very distinct shaft of light that runs down the center of the highway, and it happens literally only at 1 p.m. And so the shaft of light was very, very important to me because it felt like it was site-specific in terms of starting the show. It indicated a beginning, and it lasts maybe 10, 15 minutes tops at full, I don't really know how, at full luminosity. And so this is what it was like. Okay, here's photographs on the pillars, and people walked around, and that was it. It was 3 hours out of a year, and I worked all year, all the time, until the show went up. And I worked 10 years, all year, all the time, until the show was done. And here's how it was. It's within walking distance of my house. And in a section of the city that had been bisected by an elevated highway. With many older cities, when a highway ran through, it destroyed a pretty large section of the neighborhood, and Chicago has this significantly, so does Philadelphia. And so it was very important to me. The space was what dictated making the photographs. So the installation came first, and then the photographs were the secondary part of the installation. So my wife and I would get up like 6 a.m. and go and hang them up the day of. And they would be prepared, they would be ready to go by about 12:30, and then we would have the show. This was what it was like. It's about 2.5 blocks long and about a block wide. Here's Manny, who is Manny Dominguez Jr., who was my first intern, because I just totally took this project on like I was supposed to be doing it, and was like, all right, I'll have an intern. I had no idea. Yeah. So Manny was just a neighbor, and he is a successful photographer, and he's also awesome. And he helped to clean under the highway for many years, for many, many years. This is probably like 2003, and we had to like drag out mattresses. Like, it was really a disaster under the highway, but sorry, worth it. And Manny has managed to stay in my life, like many of the people who have worked in this project, and many who I have kind of through the years, like I kind of like to hold on. So Manny just has to get a shout out every time, longest intern. Everyone got a list, and it included a very, very brief title and a number, so that if you wanted to come up to the front and buy a $5 photocopy that was about 7 inches by 9 inches, you could come up and buy one as long as we had them. And by we, that meant me, my wife, my sister, my mother, and Manny. And then it increased as time went on, as more people became interested in the project and helped out. So the only reason why there was this particular list was for ease of purchase, and it did not indicate how you should check out the exhibition. You could walk in and out of the installation at any given point, and you could still kind of come away with the same idea of narrative, but constructing it yourself. Let's take a look at this. Here's my cousin Rita, and here's Aunt Lil, my wife's aunt, and here's some lady I have no idea, and here's some other lady. So as time went on, then more and more people came to the show, and my cousin brought lawn chairs to sit at the front and kind of watch people come up. And it kind of, while the actual structure of the installation stayed the same and the plan stayed the same for the entire 10 years, it changed over time because I began to get critical notice. However, this configuration of Cousin Rita and Aunt Lil and some random person right in the middle pretty much stayed the same from the beginning, along with the lawn chairs that were brought. This has nothing to do with anything except that this guy's shirt matches this photo. So this was it. 10 years I worked on it, and it was, I will be happy to answer all questions about it. It's so much in my head you just can't even imagine. It was really life-changing, and it really encompassed an enormous amount of what my life has become and what it was during that time period, which seems a little nuts, but full-blown, like, I didn't have kids, like, the whole life shifted from what I'd thought. And this was the one that always began the installation, which was, if you're reading this, fuck you. And these are all of the last show, all 231. And I would edit these each year. I would go through, and I would constantly be making new photos and moving photos in the installation and shifting them one to the other. So old ones would come out and new ones would come in. They would move places about in the installation. Some years some would be removed and they would come back in 2 or 3 years later. I decided that they mattered. And that was it. That was how it worked. And so I had shows, like during the course of this whole run, I had shows other places. Here's a show at the Wexner, and here's a fancy gallery show. But to be honest, like, it's always just this. Always came back to this every single time. Like, this was the end. And then the end result of this was 3 hours on May 2nd, 2010. And that was it. That was what I worked for. So the other things are great. They're awesome. But they were not my focus. They were all kind of in preparation and thinking about editing for the actual installation. In 2004, I started to show slideshows at a local community center as a works in progress. I felt very strongly that everyone should be able to see a part of my editing process, and transparency was very, very important to me in terms of the whole project. But as the internet became easier to navigate and more people had access to it, the slideshow actually became a little outdated. I stopped doing it in about 2007, only because it was possible to use the same kind of transparency techniques online, and people could have access to the exact same kind of structure of editing. Like here it is in the Whitney Biennial. And here it is right by I-95, right up front in Ellsworth. Hello, same thing. Yeah, here it is in France. All right. This is just one section I just put in because I feel like this is something that comes up every time with questions. These are the cameras that I've used. This is the very first one that I ever got. This was a Canon Rebel, a film camera, 35mm film, and it was made famous by Andre Agassi. So that was the first one that I had. And here's a photo I made with that camera. And then here's my next camera, birthday present from the missus, of 4-megapixel Minolta image. And here's a photo I made with that camera. And here's a Nikon D70. And here's one I made with that one. And here's the one I use now, the D300. And here's one I made with that. So pretty much it makes no difference to me whatsoever. I need the equipment to work, and I need to be able to know how to use it. But in truth, the camera is not of great interest to me, and I'm not tremendously engaged with the importance of technology. I'm more interested in the craft of the image, and it doesn't make a difference in terms of the kind of expensive needs of technology that sometimes people get a little caught up with. I mean, but now I have this fancy D300, so what am I talking about? I mean, come on. Anyway, so during the course of the installation, I generally use 3 forms of photos. One is text-based, and the other is architectural, and then the third is portraiture. So these 3 were very important to have so that the images kind of bounced off of each other and spoke to each other in the installation. And all 3 needed to be in existence so that it felt like people could pinball among the images and read it as their own narrative. All of the portraits that I make are portraits of strangers. So they're all portraits of people who I've met and asked to make their photo, and that's the initial meeting that I have with them. So almost always the exchange is, I explain why I want to make their photo, where it can possibly go, my interest in why I want to make the photo, and almost always that's the end of it. So with these portraits, I've just met these people, and our exchange is maybe 5 minutes tops, and I generally don't see them again. I always say my name. If I have a card, I offer it. I tell them where the exhibition might be coming up, and then as kind of I moved forward, more about I might show it in a gallery, or as I started to work on America, it might be in a book that I'm making. So generally, it's explained every time when I'm having an exchange with someone and asking to make their portrait. But that's it. This woman is my neighbor, Eileen, and she's atypical because I met her, I knocked on her door and asked to come in and make a portrait of her. And this was the portrait that came out of our first meeting. But because the project went on for a long period of time, many of the people became people who I either began to know because they were from the neighborhood, or I saw again, or who I contacted to discuss where the photo might go. And Eileen was one of those people. So I photographed her a number of times, and she's a good friend. This is a woman I met in Chicago. And I made this photo, and then a year and a half, I saw her in the exact same place in Chicago, like on the exact same corner. It was so nuts. She was just standing here when I was driving by, and then the next time, a year and a half later, here she was in the exact, she didn't live in the same spot. It was just this most insane coincidence. But it was really so spectacularly beautiful to me. I was very moved by this chance encounter, and it was one that resonated with me for a long time. So, of the forms, of the kinds of photographs that I make, it's very important to me that each one be strong in and of itself, and also connect to all of the other photos. So it has to be strong within the frame, and then it has to connect from one photo to the next, and then it has to resonate within the body of work. So it has to do all three jobs. This is one which I like very much, but it was right on the cusp. And this is one that I love very, very much. And how could you not? But let me see if I can do this. So, the echoing of the form of these two photos is of great importance. And this is one that was right on the edge. It's almost a little too precious for me in terms of the idea of presentation of architecture, flattening, blah, 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 like all theory shit. So, but the kind of beauty in the exchange of these two things is something that was very, very important to me throughout the entire installation. So the way it worked is that each one of the photographs had to have a very similar movement, and a similar movement from one to the next, and it had to make sense from one photograph to the next, and it had to make sense from across the aisle, and it had to make sense like a palindrome to the one that was a full block away on the other side. And so during the course of '95, a lot of photos that I thought were really strong got cut out because I couldn't make them work like that. This was one of them. This was one that I really liked, I felt pretty strongly about. I could not make it fit in the installation. Oh, wait, but then here she is right now on Facebook. So, because I had to find her and invite her to do the opening, because now she can actually be in the show, because she couldn't be in '95. Yeah, look at this. Now I'm using the pointer again, because look, it was so good. Just couldn't fucking make it work. I tried so hard, and I had it in the first aisle that was heavy on personal imagery. Should actually go back to this, and then we can move all the way back through this, which is, so for the map, each aisle was heavy on one particular theme. It wasn't locked down. The first aisle was personal imagery, and then the second was gender and fluidity of gender, and the third was addiction and desire, and the fourth was American identity, and the fifth was getting by, and then the sixth was hope and pride and joy. And so those themes were strong, and this is so nuts, those themes were strong running north-south. East-west had sub-themes that ran across so that there would be a connection for each one. And in using these particular themes, I felt like I could get at the idea of everything. I could talk about the beauty and struggle of everyday life by paring it down to 6 kind of universal themes that could be easily read and navigated through, while still not giving away information and still making the viewer kind of make their own connections with the work. Look at that, I love that guy. This was one too. This is one where this was a photograph that I liked, I felt was okay, was okay. And then I felt when it was paired with this one, it made it much stronger, and it made both of the images much stronger. And I felt very strongly that this kind of ambiguity of World War II reference and this kind of misjudgment of history and the kind of mysterious divide between reality and fiction, coming from my own personal encounter with this guy, and kind of coming from the portrait that I opted to show of him, which was this one. It is not quite as menacing as others, not quite as distant as others. The two together talk a lot about the absence of American history in our lives, in our everyday lives. And so together they resonated much more. Ah, look, it's Mickey. So this is a photo that I took, and I really liked it. It became a real cornerstone. And then the next year at I-95, oh look, here's Mickey just walking back from Target, which is right over here, back to his house, which is right over here. And he's walking by, and then he and his friends are like, dude, I'm in a show. Oh my God, now I'm in the back of this book. So it was really kind of spectacular. I really cannot get enough of that. And so often people who are in the photographs, who are in the neighborhood, would see themselves in the show, and this is an example of a time where it was actually particularly great because for the most part, when this is a kind of crowd scene that comes from 2th Street, which is part of the post-Mummers celebration, and Mummers is a complex Philadelphia white working class parade that happens on New Year's Day. And this is kind of happening at the essential street after party. So it's a kind of crowd shot, and while I asked both of these people, can I take your photo, it's not the same in terms of a full description of where it would be. So it was kind of a pleasure to be able to meet him after and talk about the photo and the importance of it. And also, off the subject, didn't my mom just see him in Target literally last week? And I was like, this. First of all, I would not recognize, I stare at this picture all the time. Worked on it, included it in all the things, would not recognize him in a million years. I have no idea how my mom was like, wait, excuse me, are you a mummer? Are you, literally, I think she actually knew the brigade too. I think she was like, are you in Froggy Car? So this photo, which I really like of Mickey, replaced this particular photo that I had in the installation at the beginning. So while I never consciously looked for particular things, it was things that were just happening in the moment. There were some images that kind of got swapped out for others that I felt did the same kind of job. And I felt that it was too much to have both this one and this one in the installation. And so I went with the other one. And I like this photo a lot. I think this photo is a strong photo. And I hate this photo so much, I don't even know what to do. It slipped past like the first edit, and this usually doesn't happen to me. Usually what happens is with digital, card gets saved, I drag it over, and then I make a little like thumbnail sheet of ones that I want to check out. And this was one that I kind of saved. It's like, oh, maybe I'll take a look at it. And when I went back the next day, I was like, oh my God, it's so fucking hideous. I can't believe it. It's a disaster. I can't even believe that I thought that this was going to kind of make it past my censor. Which, it's seriously, I have to tell you, it's so nuts, but like infuriating to me that I made this mistake. Which now I'm telling people that I made this mistake. Like now let me just talk about it. But, you know, I think I couldn't quite figure out why I was so worked up about it. I was so genuinely disappointed in myself and so genuinely like, oh my God, what was I thinking? But I love this one. I think this one is really strong, but when you come down to it, in terms of the idea of form and kind of what this portraiture is talking about, they're really not so different in terms of the ideas that go into making this a portrait that talks about American identity. But this one is terrible, and this one is not. And I have to say, I thought after I was like, I've got to keep going with this. And I was like, no, fuck it. I'm just keeping it unconscious. That's crazy. You could spend a whole lifetime trying to figure out why one portrait is engaging and one is not. No, that's just it. This one's good, this one's not. That's the end of it. Then this one's good. So I just had to put an extra good one in because I couldn't be leaving with that. So as I moved, I switched from film to digital in the project kind of about the same time that most people switched from film to digital. When digital became the norm for people taking photographs, it was very important for me to have the same kind of technology that people made their own photographs with so they could see the process from start to finish. And so I thought, am I too fast? Thank you.
You're fine,
thank you. I thought this would be a big shift in terms of less work. It would be less work in terms of editing and in terms of structure, which was 100% wrong because it just meant I could make so many more photographs, and then look at the minutia of these photographs and just endlessly work on which one was going to make the most sense. So these two are two photographs that I like a lot, and they're taken about 2 or 3 seconds apart. And they both do different things. For these two photographs, I like them equally, but it has caused me to say a great deal of consternation is really understating it in terms of trying to figure out which one will do the job best for where it needs to go. And this one, and this one, too. Neither's better, but this is the one that I always use because her hand is open and there's a different kind of exchange that happens. This is very closed and confrontational in a very different way than this, which is a very small gesture, but a gesture that's very tender and somewhat inviting and changes the dynamic of the portrait, I think, significantly. Not that one is not preferable to the other, but this is the one that I want. I want when a viewer is looking at a portrait, not always, but almost always, to have a sense of exchange with the image. And this is one that facilitates that better than this one. Oh, here's Ashley's grandmother, an old intern's grandmother, and I was visiting at her house, and then this is the photo that got made, which I'm always eternally grateful for. And this is Kelly Harper from 13th and Pine. So, and then this was a photograph of Judy Padilla. She was a woman who worked at a nuclear munitions plant and had gotten cancer, and there was a very long story as to a fight that they had had about getting benefits for her cancer. And she'd had a breast removed, and in the photo she was showing me her reconstructed breast. And I got in touch with her about the show, and she said, you know, like, I'm just not that comfortable with you showing that photo. I feel like I've gotten a lot of flack from it, from people who I've worked with kind of in this, in the nuclear reparations community, essentially. And so that was it. So I had to pull it. And that was it. It was a really strong shot and a real disappointment to me because I personally loved it, and I also feel like it was a strong image talking about what happened where she worked at Rocky Flats in Colorado. But if someone says, I don't want you to show the photo, that's the end of that. So all three of these were kind of about gender construction and what makes one's own gender. And then this one came out. So, but these were essentially across, these in I-95, they ran east-west, not north-south. And it was to connect it, they were each about a block apart. So a lot of the images I make are very personal. This one is of my great-grandmother's butcher shop on Susquehanna Avenue in North Philadelphia. Not that you would need to know it, but for me, there's a great deal of weight to this photograph. And this is also always included. This is my mother, and here's me, because I'm the eldest of the grandchildren. So this is my grandparents' wall in Northeast Philadelphia. And this is also very, very intimate to me. It's much, much more intimate, I think, than I could probably express easily. And it has the same amount of weight that many of the portraits in which people are exposing these very intimate moments have. And it has the same amount of weight that I'm asking viewers to kind of put forth, to make their own work when looking at the images. So this one is fairly heavy for me and very, very intimate. It's the house that I grew up in. All right, look at this. Here's Negrito. It's by Anselm Kiefer. I first saw this in 1987 at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. I went up in the hallway after a show by him. And then look at this that I made that much later, 2003. So I kept coming back to this one and thinking about it and thinking, like, what the hell? Yeah, hello? Take a look at this. How awesome is that? Yeah. It's like a 20-year difference, right? No, that's more than that, more than 20 years. So awesome. So I have a lot of things like this, a lot of unconscious references to form and geometry and images that have held a lot of resonance to me. And this one is one that I love. It's by Louis Baltz, it's Sausalito, and it's one that I didn't know before I started I-95, but I felt very strongly that I had to work my ass off on essentially learning about the entirety of photographic history. And this was one in terms of new topographics that mattered to me a lot with form. And so this was an image that I made that directly referenced it and a kind of movement. And then this was one I made right after Katrina that was directly referencing. Okay, so I-95 is done, right? And I'm totally full-blown out of my mind. But then I went to the Gulf after the BP oil spill and did a big project for a couple months. Yeah, and here's that. That's how fast I'm going with it. So then what I'm working on now is a show at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. So let me just say, this is literally a dream come true. I mean, it's not an exaggeration to say, like, a waking fantasy that you have your whole life, like of winning the lottery or the Super Bowl. Like, not possible to kind of articulate what it means. I mean, beyond my wildest dreams. So I'm working on the show, and I'm also, I'll be perfectly frank, losing my fucking mind because I'm trying to both suspend reality and get through it and do all the work that I want to do, and also not miss the moment of being like, oh my God, this is literally something that I could have never even dreamed would happen. And so both trying to actually kind of speak with authority and think about the show and say this is what I want to happen, and still be present, like it's just, I'm losing my mind. My Xanax intake is literally, is upped. The doctor is gonna have to be thanked in the book. Actually, literally is thanked in the book. But the reason why I'm saying this is because, so I worked this whole time on I-95 and it's like I just didn't stop. It was like I started and I just didn't stop. When I started, I worked as a babysitter and that was my job up until I got the Pew in 2005 when I could quit. And it was kind of as if I just started it and I never stopped and I still haven't. Like here's the culmination of it is this big museum show. And it's been, while extraordinarily gratifying and I'm filled with honor to have it, it's also been difficult to navigate in terms of moving this particular even though I think it makes perfect sense for there to be an exchange in terms of where this work fits. Anyway, this was an image that I'd always had kind of from the beginning of the show. And then this is where it's going to go in the Philadelphia Museum of Art. And then one of the things about this is this has always been a staple for me. And about a month ago, this kid, his name's Lawrence Rose, who his mom, this photograph was used in a kid's book for the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and his mother called to say that he'd been shot and killed. This is really very close to my house. And his mother actually literally lives only 3 blocks away, and his sister as well, who also came to the meeting. So she saw this, a friend of hers saw the photograph and said, you know, Boo was in this photograph. Wait, get the book, wait till you get it, and we had a very emotional meeting. She came to the museum and we talked about it and talked about how this has been, for me, a very, very intimate photo because I've looked at it for so many years, and in many ways, I mean, here these kids have never aged for me. I don't know these kids. I mean, I didn't know these kids for more than 5 minutes, and yet they are so much an integral part of my life. It's remarkable for being a 2-dimensional image. So this had not been the original plan, but I felt that it was both a fitting memorial and a dedication I would like to make to both Boo and Booty, who's in the middle, his cousin. So there's a lot. This wasn't what I'd had thought would be happening, and there's a lot of weight that goes along with this now that I hadn't thought of before. But there you go. That's how it goes. This is Antoinette Conti, and she's my across-the-street neighbor. I'm going to use 39 billboards throughout the city. So there'll be 39 billboards that are just images, and they'll be all throughout Philadelphia. This is one that will change. This is at 10th and Reed, which is right by my mom's house. My mom lives right here, near CVS, and then I live kind of over here, 13th and Dickinson. So Antoinette will be going up right at this kind of holy trinity of the Acme, the CVS, and Colonial Village. And Antoinette, this particular billboard, most of them are not named, is called La Corona. So La Corona is the crown in both Italian and in Spanish. And Italian immigrants have been the longest standing immigrant group in South Philadelphia. The newest and largest is a group of Mexican-American immigrants. And so Antoinette will be up, and there's the crown. And then the next month, her next door neighbor, Fernando Trevino, will be up, who is also my across the street neighbor. So both native languages include the crown in terms of a common word. And this is one that will be in the exhibition. This is Leo's house. So the houses go, so here's Antoinette, she's directly across the street from me. Then here's Fernando, he's next to Antoinette. And then this was Leo's mantle. So this was made at the house that was literally right next to Fernando's. So these are all within essentially like 20 yards of each other, including myself. So yeah, how fucking awesome is that? Yeah, it's gonna be great. So anyway, I'm working on the billboard project. I'm waiting to hear where all of the billboards will be. It's very difficult, mainly because signage is very important. It will matter a great deal to me where each one goes so that it talks to the area and references the specific place, on and on and on. So this is one that will be up, and this one too, and this, which is 3 Mile Island, and this, which is the San Andreas Fault, and this woman in Louisiana, and this. The whole billboard project will be structured around a very basic kind of, a basic outline of the Odyssey, which is also a 10-year-long project in terms of getting back home. And so fortune and homecoming and migration will play a very, very big part in that. So it's kind of echoing the exact same idea of the 10-year project, the 10-year movement. And with this particular installation, actually, they'll all move back kind of to the same given point. Oh, this is Sharday, who was, she helped make a film about me, and now she's kind of my play niece. She's just someone who's, she's moved into my life in a way that was very important. This is the day before she's leaving for the Army. And there's a long story that goes along with this. She had originally it had been planned for her billboard to be at Broad and Erie in Philadelphia because of the number of crash reports reported at this particular intersection in terms of life choices and the difficulty of navigating this particular intersection. But literally right below where the billboard hangs is another sign that says, "We ship to prisons," right? So there's no fucking way it's appropriate to have an image of a person kind of in this particular place in which there can be some sort of irony read in that. And so I felt very strongly that I had to shift the whole project, even though that was a keystone of the project. And Sharday herself is very involved in it, and she's written a number of things for it. So I opted instead to drive to the crossroads in Mississippi where Robert Johnson had sold his soul to the devil. And so this will be the image that then goes up in its place, because it could no longer be a portrait, but had to be something kind of about a journey. Here's Elle Hatch. She's in the mix. This one had to be edited out. I wanted it a lot, but I felt like it wasn't fair. I think that kind of looking at the pictures of my neighbors and thinking about it, it seems unfair to me to foist something that could be possibly very difficult into someone's life. I think it's a little like Atlanta, but we're more walkable and we're closer, so a lot of these images are like they're in your own living room. And while some of the images I had initially chosen that were kind of challenging, I was like, there's no way. Like, I can't force someone to have this in their own life. Yeah, but this kid's going in. Yeah. So's Mattoon, look. Oh, hello, hello. This one's definitely going in. Martin Luther King Day in Biloxi. These ladies are going in. Yeah, so that's it. That's pretty much it. This was one that I had wanted for above I-95. It's looking up at the crack that runs right down the center of the highway, right where there's a kind of not quite junction. And I really wanted it. And finally, when I started to take a look at it, I was like, no, it's like too much, like it's like a flat line, like people won't read it right away. So I swapped it up for the stairs of the Philadelphia Museum of Art, which is also kind of an abstract image, but used for sledding in the winter. So I felt like the repurposing of it was actually equally as important for this particular spot. Okay, that's it. That's my whole talk. It was long, right? Yeah. Is there time for questions? Questions? Do I have time for that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I feel like I was talking for like 15 hours. Jesus. Oh, I will fully force someone to ask a question. Literally. Oh, thank you. Yes.
Okay, the one that you just hate.
Mm-hmm.
What is it you hate?
I have no idea.
Okay, it's just a visceral thing.
Yep, a visceral feel, an intense visceral feeling, and one that was actually surprising even to me. That like my anger and repulsion was very, very intense with it. No answers to why so intense, but fully real.
And it looks like most of your photographs were done with people from Philadelphia, but then you said you were in Chicago and you've been in Louisiana. So how much of it's Philadelphia and how much is it outside?
I would say it's about half Philadelphia. I'd say about half is Philadelphia, half is travels through the United States, some in Europe, but for the most part, it's close to home.
Well, I'm from Philadelphia and I went to Girls High.
What is going on? Julie, do you see what's going on? Hold on, reunion. What are you saying? What is going on? This is so awesome. Yeah, oh my God, hi, where are you from?
I'm originally from Germany.
Oh, okay, yeah. I can barely talk about this. I'm very excited about it, so, yeah. Well,
I've been here 43 years, but I was born
no,
here.
look, you lock it down when you're from Germantown. I know how it goes, so, well, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming. And
I enjoyed it so much.
yeah, before you go.
I mean, what gave you the idea to use I-95 as your big pillars for your installation?
I think, I've always been very interested in urban planning, and this is very poor urban planning and an unused space. But it's a very beautiful, I'm sorry, I meant to talk in the mic. And I'm very, I'm kind of, as a kid, I lived in Queen Village for a little bit as I-95 was being built before it was opened in the 70s. And it was very important to me to kind of activate this somewhat, the implications of this being a dead space. And then also use it because the literal idea kind of support of commerce that's moving by a particular neighborhood, and the idea of kind of these pilasters holding up, commerce and goods and literal and metaphoric traffic, and how this kind of space is navigated underneath in terms of our everyday lives. So that was pretty much it. Thank you very much. Do you still have family there?
I do.
Okay, yeah, well, I just,
back next week.
all right, also, before this is over, then that's it. Yes?
I know you mentioned that everything is like the Odyssey. Is there an actual name for the whole billboard project?
No, I think it's actually just going to be a billboard project. Yeah, I had thought about it a lot, and I have a tendency to overthink things That's how I roll. And I felt like as this moved forward, that because I didn't know the exact locations of where it would be, it had to be kept fluid, and that the idea of using the Odyssey as the structure, so there's a lot of sea theme and there's a lot of movement, but it seemed like a direct reference wouldn't really do the project justice because it would kind of lock it in a way for people to see it. And I want these images to be both a place where people know to go to look at it and to be a surprise and to be also something in people's everyday lives. So both in terms of the Odyssey, both a literal homecoming and a journey simultaneously. I thought for a little bit about calling it Nostos, which is Greek. It's very specific about Odysseus's homecoming. And then I was like, who the fuck will know that besides some, yeah, right. I didn't know it until I was like, I've got to do all this Homeric research. Yeah, I had no idea. And then I was like, what am I thinking? Like, let me title it this obscure thing that people have no idea about. I'm out of my fucking mind. So anyway, that's why I just came back to Billboard Project. So I feel like loose enough to be able to say these are all connected, but actually, again, open-ended enough to allow people to make their own narrative. Thank you for asking. Yes, and then yes, and then yes.
Are you planning to continue under I-95?
Nope, 10 years.
It's
Over. 10 years is it. It was from the start, the plan was one full decade, my 30s. I started when I was 30 and ended when I was 40. And that was it. There was no, for a lot of reasons, but particularly because it felt very important to contain the work to one particular decade so that it could be this kind of long epic narrative that wouldn't be overworked and would end succinctly. So, thank you. Yes?
Can you talk about your relationship and how it's shifted over the 10 years to your community? I mean, you're photographing people you run into on the street, potentially over and over again, and how that, I would imagine sometimes people may get upset with it, but it sounds like most of your interactions, most people see the photographs, they actually are really excited about it, and how maybe that kind of sense of pride, in the sense of being photographed changes in some ways?
I think for the most part, my relationship to the community has pretty much remained the same. There hasn't really been any shift. But I mean, part of the issue with these still photographs and kind of the idea of using a portrait as a metaphor for something when that portrait is a real person. There's a great imbalance of power in street photography, and I think a lot of the time about the idea of kind of using these portraits over and over again. When it's like the woman who said, I want you to pull this image out, where people are able to kind of, they should be able to weigh in on their own image if they can. That's not really possible in terms of this project because of the importance for me of photographing strangers as a component of it. So I actually don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. And in terms of my own connection to the community, there's really no change at all, except for my obviously high fancy levels that is really blowing up the 1300 block of Dickinson Street. It's wild on that. but no, there hasn't been a shift in that. And in terms of people's responses to that, it's difficult to gauge because, again, these are strangers. And as much as I try and have a connection, sometimes it's not possible to. Yes, Madame.
Just thinking about, talking about an image has to be strong, but something that may not work now or that you have a strong objection to now. Are you also open to the possibility that in 5 years you're going to take the photograph that explains that or makes sense of that image, and maybe the one you hate or one you feel like didn't fit, all of a sudden it's going to fit and it's going to be amazing? It seems like there's a lot of connections, and over time, I was just more like observing that and seeing what you think. Do you see that kind of thing playing out? Yes,
I absolutely do. And it's too late for 95. Like that's the end of it. But there are some things. I mean, it was mainly it was a full mix of intuitive and intellectual So some of the things were things where I kind of thought, this is right, and this makes the most sense, without really knowing. And there were also some things that didn't fit that I think maybe later on I'll kind of come around to. When I was, the last trip I had to the Gulf Coast was to Morgan City, Louisiana, and I made this photo that I still don't know whether I like it or not. But it's been in my mind really a lot. And I don't know if it means it'll inform another photo or if it will become a photo that I think is a good photo, or if it'll become a photo that references something else that I'll be able to find down the road. And there's a lot like that. There were a lot of images like that. So I tried to, 10 years was long enough to try and kind of muddle through some of that. But there were certainly loose ends like that one.
For things that just kind of won't let go, though, that just keep, like they're trying to say something, you know, to you, or, you know, there's a reason for them, but you just don't know why.
Yeah, there's a number of things. Usually I can figure out why. Usually, like I can come to what it is that's compelling to me, but not always. And sometimes I think those things will kind of move forward. And as I started to work on this big museum show, I started to see some things very much along the lines of what you're talking about. The kind of thinking of, this would be good if I had an image that did this, or this image didn't work, but I was trying to force it. So, yeah. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about kind of the accessibility of your images and how you're sort of relating them to where you're showing them and things like that, whether it's the I-95 project or the billboards and things like that. I know you said you've shown a lot of work at the community centers to show kind of the process. If you could just talk about kind of the idea of accessibility with your images, that'd be great.
It's, for me, for I-95, the spectrum of the whole project, it was very, very important for it to be accessible in terms of affordable, in terms of able to get to the show for my own community, and able to be easily navigated. And that does not necessarily mean the content of the images, but rather the actual physical enactment of it. But that's of great importance to me. The project is very, you know, one of the things is that, like, I say shit like, the project is very, like, it's still happening. Like, it's like I'm putting the brakes on super, super slow. I have this big show, and it's about this, but it's not the same. But it's almost like it's taken me like a year and a half to kind of be like, oh, I guess it's over. It's like yeah. Anyway, it was an integral part of the project because it's of great importance to me. I have, I believe in the transcendence and importance of visual art. And I mean, like, that's so over the top and fucking ridiculous, but I can't come up with a more, a more down-home way of saying it that doesn't sound like that. So, but that's really what it's about. And so, the idea of the work being accessible to all was central to the idea of the installation, and was one of the reasons why both there's so much online, and the particular placement of the installation, and the idea of the billboard project as a component of the art museum show. Thank you for asking. Yes, and then yes, and then yes. Oh my God, this is awesome questions.
I saw that one of the billboards was funded, or that was owned by Curating.
Mm-hmm.
So could you talk about how the billboard project was funded, and then also could you talk about what it means to you to have those photos in spaces where it has something?
Okay, this is a super, super question. Right, Clear Channel, because wait till you hear this. So during the billboard project, when this first started, my initial thought was, oh, we're not buying any Clear Channel. Are you fucking kidding me? There's no way we're buying Clear Channel. This is a disaster. I refuse to support this company. Dixie Chicks. I'm going all the way back. And so when I mentioned this in terms of the project, They said, fine, we'll try and navigate it with local billboard companies and everything. And a friend of mine who has a job that kind of is, I don't really know what the job is. It's some PR or something else, said, you should talk to my friend Gary who works at Clear Channel. And I thought, okay, yeah, fine, I'll talk, but I'm firmly entrenched. There's no way. So I talked to him, and he's very happy with his job. They've been sold, and they're owned by a different company. They're not the same company that was owned during kind of the Bush debacle, in which I myself became infuriated with Clear Channel and its radio. And then while this is still a subsidiary of Clear Channel, it's not the same kind of venue. Nuts. I was like, there's no way. And then didn't Clear Channel donate 25 billboards to me and say, yeah, so this guy was like, oh, we think this is an important project, so you can have it. So my biggest accomplishment with this is that it is eliminating ad space. It is removing ad space. And so I am more than happy to take any kind of donation from Clear Channel that will then kind of remove essentially what is like a Newport and Hennessy ad across the street from me. And so it was really kind of amazing because I was, first of all, very conflicted because the name alone is like Halliburton to me. Like you hear it and you're like, oh my God, no. But I felt after talking to a number of people and doing a little research, I felt comfortable. And so the museum will buy a number of billboards and they'll donate a number of billboards. And I feel absolutely comfortable with the use of Clear Channel outdoor advertising. I mean, it was the complexity of figuring it out was nuts. But anyway, but yes, and a number of them are Clear Channel billboards. Most of them, almost all of them are. It's nuts. And one should literally be like, Dixie Chicks, Revenge, with like 3 dots, fuck Bush. You suck, Jeb. Fox, burn. So, okay, I'm just going on it, I'm sorry. Yes?
How did your neighbors feel about the whole project? The neighbors that you took photographs of and photographs,
They were all supportive of it. They were all happy. Most of my neighbors came to the show under I-95. Not a lot of people in the portraits necessarily came, but they were most certainly invited, and people on my block and kind of South Philadelphia knew about it and was happy to, often came out to it. So it was pretty nice.
do you think they understood?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's no question. Wait, I lost it. Wait, yes. Right? Yes, and then, yeah.
The first one is, so each of them is a stranger, but I was wondering if you take the photograph right when you meet them, or do you ever set it up or take it somewhere else? Like, for example, the younger woman who was in the parking lot. Were you in that parking lot and you came across and met her, or did you meet her on the street and then you went to that parking lot? I guess basically just, is it a snapshot of the moment you meet them?
Is it
never staged?
Is it the woman in the parking lot with the reactors?
With the reactors.
Yeah. No, it's never, except for the billboards, which are very different for the duration of I-95. No, it was never, I'm going to stage a shot. It was always wherever it was. And a person was told they could pose however they wanted. My direction was almost always like, if you'd like, move a little to your right or your left so you're not in a shadow, or you're not directly behind a pole, or this is why this might be better. So it was never, no, that's where she was.
And then 2 other quick questions. Have you ever been in situations where you haven't felt safe, and do you take certain precautions or not go to certain parts of town, or is it important to go balls to the wall with it and, because you're out there alone and having lived in South Philly and worked in Fishtown, there were parts of town, at least within certain parts of the day, that I did not feel safe as a woman alone walking. I also noticed that most of them are not taken at night, but I just wondered if that's something.
No, to be honest, I'm never in a place where I don't feel comfortable. Like if I didn't feel comfortable, I wouldn't be there. And so in terms of picture making, there's never really a time where I find discomfort because it wouldn't even come to the point where I would be interested in making a portrait or being in the space, because I'd be uncomfortable, and I don't enjoy that. Yeah, I mean, that's just, yeah, I know, no, I have no, it's really just wherever I am, and that's kind of just how it goes. There's no there's no plan that kind of goes along with it. So it's just what's happening.
Can you talk just a little bit about your thoughts on taking a public project with so much kind of street energy into a museum?
Mm-hmm.
How you're kind of wrapping your head around that, how you feel about it?
I have always had an affinity for this particular museum as part of my life, and I genuinely feel that it's a civic institution that art should be able to be engaged with, and that the kind of movement of this particular project to the museum is not that big of a stretch for me, because the actual exhibition is complete. So it's like talking about performance. It's the exhibition at the museum is kind of about a past event and talking about the details of this particular event. And I also feel very strongly about the idea that this work can navigate both of those spaces, and that the worth of the images is equal in both spaces. And that's very important to me, that the photographs don't shift in terms of the worth when they've moved from I-95 to an institution. They stayed the same, and the project has stayed the same and remains the same because it's done, because it's over. And that's, I think it makes perfect sense to me, and I'm actually so genuinely pleased and thrilled to be able to have this. I have no trepidation at all about the idea of it moving into a somewhat, I have no trepidation in it moving into an institution in which there are many barriers which I have issues with, because I love the museum very, very much, and think it was a very, very important part of my formative life, to be honest. But like Clear Channel, it was something where I was like, I have to think about how this will work and how it can be navigated and how I can make it very clear that the idea is that this work is of equal value in both places. And I think it'll be successful in terms of that. At least I hope it will be.